Let's talk about Semantic HTML. As you already know, basic HTML consists of elements that make up the structure of a web page. Element names can be relatively nondescript. Elements like span or div are used, but they don't help the human eye or search engines clearly identify what the content could or should be. In our current page, we have many div elements that make up the page structure. In this short example, we may or may not be able to tell what each part is for. In a complex example, it may be nearly impossible to identify the parts of the page. Although our current web page is constructed with div elements, it does successfully display the information. But as mentioned, it is not helpful if the underlying construction of the page is not built in a better way. To help solve this, we use Semantic HTML, a set of descriptive elements that help us, as developers, identify the contents of the page. These elements also help benefit responsive design, search engine optimization, and extremely important accessibility for assistive devices to browse the content. All topics to be covered in the future. In our HTML, we see div elements that work. Even so, we change the first div element to header, something typically used for the leading area of a web page. After the change is made, we see the page remains the same. Now we change the next div element to nav, something more appropriate for this part of the page. Without this naming, it can be more difficult to properly identify what this part of the code is for. We also change the next set of div elements to section. The section element is commonly used for areas that can be considered a standalone area or section of a web page. When we check the page in our browser, we see the display hasn't changed. The next set of elements can be changed to article. The article element is commonly used to identify independent self-contained content. Since there are several entries that are similar in nature, they can all be identified as such. We look at our browser again and see the page still displays as we want. Next, we have names that we would like to have stand out. We can use the strong element to give clearer meaning of the intention of this part of the content. For this, we change the div elements in all appropriate areas. Once again, we look at our browser, but this time we see the names have changed to visually stronger text. We still have nondescript div elements around what appears to be a location. For locations, the address element is commonly used instead in places intended to be identified as such. Keeping a close eye on our browser, the page remains largely the same. However, the address has become italicized. Slight differences like this may appear with different elements, but also note these can be updated with style sheets. Finally, we change the last set of div elements to footer to represent the bottom area of the web page. One last look at our browser and we see the page remains the same. With our descriptive elements in place, our web page displays correctly. Although div elements work, they ultimately do not help us identify the content. But because of Semantic HTML, the human eye, as well as search engines, can better identify what they are. And as mentioned, there remains the benefits of better responsive design and accessibility. It should be said that Semantic HTML elements can be almost any descriptive word. However, it is best practice to use what is already available and stick to elements commonly used to remain as consistent with standards as possible. Remember to explore this and other examples to see how they work. Thank you for watching.